So again, welcome to Northstar and CCRS. Cheers for collaboration. I'm excited about this because I think it's an example of the great things that can happen when different parts of our ABE system work together. In this case, Atlas and Northstar. And if we go to the next slide, I will quickly introduce myself before I turn it over to Leah. I am Kristine Kelly, and I am the Atlas Literacy Coordinator, and I've been fortunate enough to work with Leah on this project. And Leah will introduce herself, and she will get us started in the webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah, and I am the Northstar Curriculum Coordinator. And that means that I support and help to develop the learning resources for Northstar. And I also work with Literacy Minnesota on our English Unlocked curriculum project, which is curriculum resources for ESL learners. And we're going to get started with our agenda for today. So we will share a little bit about Northstar and the resources that were available before this project started, and then also share about what we have created through this project. We're going to talk a little bit about one of those resources, which are curriculum maps, and review the shifts for the college and career readiness standards. We will also talk about ways that you might incorporate the new unit projects that we'll be introducing to you today. And we will hear from teachers who are currently using Northstar in their classrooms, which is really exciting. And you will have an opportunity to, in some breakout rooms, to talk through how you might use some of these resources in your classroom. And then we will wrap up. So that is what you can expect from us today. So just to get started, if you wouldn't mind chatting your name and where you're joining us from, and maybe just quickly, yes or no, if you currently use the Northstar curriculum, just so that we can get a sense of who is joining us today. We'll take just a minute to let you share that. And just as a reminder, if you're joining us later, if people are still popping in, you can chat to Patsy Egan if you have any issues with tech. Hi, Barb. Hi, Dani. Right. Hi, Sue. And it looks like some more people are joining us. So as you join us, if you just want to keep introducing yourselves and letting us know where you're from, and if you currently use Northstar, that would be great. And so it looks like there are some individuals who are joining us who haven't used Northstar before. So we will be sharing, like I said, about what the Northstar learning resources are and where you can access them, and then we'll be sharing about the new resources that were developed through this specific project. So the Northstar curriculum provides sets of lesson plans that are ready to go for teachers to support learners working towards the Northstar standards. And here on the screen, you can see the topics that Northstar currently has lesson plans, standards, and online assessments for. The Northstar standards and the Northstar curriculum provide guidance for teachers on what skills to teach and how to make those skills accessible to their learners. And I like to say that every curriculum has a heartbeat or specific standards at its core. And of course, the core of Northstar, what we're really supporting students and supporting teachers to help students achieve is building those computer skills, those digital literacy skills. And the standards help learners to build the skills they need to access information and communicate using the internet, social media, and various devices. And they're divided into 3 categories. So the first category that you see on the screen, those are the foundational computer skills, basic computer skills that learners need to develop. And then in the second column, those are some essential software skills for common programs that are often used. And finally, in the third column, those are more opportunities for learners to apply those foundational skills to one of those topics that you see. And all of these topics include detailed standards that learners need to build in order to be proficient in one of these areas for work and school. And currently we have 13 units of lesson plans available, and our resources continue to grow. So for example, right now our team is working on telehealth standards to support learners to navigate online health portals, like maybe you're familiar with something like MyChart, in order to make and attend virtual appointments with a provider. So you can always look forward to new things joining Northstar. So the regular Northstar curriculum that already existed before this project started, I'm going to zero in on some of the cool features of the Northstar lesson plans that make them user friendly. First of all, the lessons are written to support intermediate level ESL students and above, but they can certainly be scaffolded down to support lower level learners. And many teachers have done that successfully. The lessons are scripted, which is pretty awesome, we think, because it supports all levels of teachers and volunteers too. It really makes the lessons ready to go. So you don't have to digest and plan for how you might introduce or model that content. We've already done it for you. The script is there. And because it's there, you can more easily adapt it to your specific class. And it can be a huge time saver to just have those grab and go lesson plans. There are about 7 to 15 lessons per unit topic. It really depends on the depth of standards. Sometimes there's more lessons. And it can take about 2 hours per lesson plan. That's the average, but it definitely can take longer or less time depending on learner level for your group. So what you see here on the screen is the teacher launch page, and that first page tells you how to prep for the lessons, what you're going to need to make copies of, maybe some background knowledge or background skills that you might want to brush up on before you teach this. And it really just helps you to be prepared and ready to go in the classroom. Another cool thing about the curriculum is that it has a predictable lesson structure. So there are routines, and we know that routines help to reduce stress in the classroom for both the teacher and the learner. So you know what to expect, and so do the students. They're structured with warm-ups. Then there's always an opportunity for goal setting around sharing the objectives for the lesson. There's a model and explain where the teacher is showing students a skill, and then an opportunity to do it together, that scaffolded practice. Then Pear Explorer, and I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about that portion of the lesson in a moment. There's tasks where students apply the digital literacy skills to an authentic task, vocabulary practice, and a wrap up or a check for understanding. So the lessons always follow this pattern. And the routines can make it easier for you to break up the lessons and maybe hand off a portion to a volunteer in your classroom, or maybe just have a nice place to pause in your class. And we've received feedback that the lessons are supportive for teachers who have not taught digital literacy skills in the past and who might be unsure of how to start. It can really help you to develop that voice in digital literacy instruction. And they're used in lots of different contexts, nationally and even internationally. So it's important for us for these lessons to be really simple and easy for more experienced teachers to use and less experienced teachers. Another cool feature about them is that they're standalone. So you don't have to teach every single lesson plan in a unit. You can pick and choose based on specific skills that your students need to work on. And the last thing that's cool about them is that they're living documents. All of our curriculum is. So we have a feedback form that teachers can fill out, and we periodically adapt the lessons based on feedback from learners and from teachers. So one really, really important component of the Northstar lessons that I wanted to highlight is the Pear Explorer. And this section comes after a skill has been modeled by the teacher and practiced together with support during the do it together portion of the lesson. And now learners have an opportunity to try something. And the reason that this is so important is that we know that digital literacy skills are developed through that practice. And for mastery, learners need opportunities to experiment with things on their computers. And this section of the lesson really supports them to build their capacity for problem solving and for asking for assistance if they need it. And it really helps students to build their confidence when they have multiple opportunities to experiment like this in the classroom. So it's really important for teachers to be intentional about giving students the space to explore. We know that some students are apprehensive to use devices. They think that they might break them or that that they can't do it. And so they want kind of step-by-step modeling or step-by-step instruction. But it's really important for students to learn how to troubleshoot and problem solve on their own. And so this is really helping students to do that. So in this example, learners are navigating websites by using the back button and the forward button within a web page to bring them to a home page. So it's telling them to try things, but it's not telling them exactly how to do it. And I think Kristine wanted to talk a little bit more about how productive struggle, that piece really shows up in CCRS.
Yeah, well, one of the key points of some of the shifts that we've done with the CCRS is to engage students in more productive struggle. And as part of that, we want to always ask ourselves, what are we doing as teachers that our students could be doing? And what I really like about the Pear Explorer routine in Northstar is that it could have been just another opportunity for the teacher to continue to guide students, but the teacher is handing it off. And students are getting to collaborate and support each other doing this work. Teachers, obviously, you can be available to for some troubleshooting, but it really is putting it out onto the students so that they can do the heavy lifting of this guided practice.
Thanks, Kristine. Yes, so the lesson plans and the teacher guide for Northstar does include guidance for teachers on how to set up Pear Explorer. Again, we really recommend that teachers there's a lot of intentionality in setting this up, since it's so important for learners to develop digital literacy, is to have these opportunities. So here on the screen, you'll see just a portion of some scripted language about how a teacher might introduce this portion of the lesson to their class. Because again, it can feel kind of unnatural, maybe for the students, that they expect the teacher to be more of a leader in the classroom. We want teachers to be guides on the side and to really let learners with a partner. And we also say 2 learners to 1 computer whenever you can too, just so that they can troubleshoot together. So here the teacher is explaining kind of the benefits of Pear Explorer and why they might want to do that, making it explicit and transparent to learners that this is a valuable portion of the lesson. Another thing that we include are some sentence frames and questions. These come from Jessica Jones, who's a lead teacher with Literacy Minnesota. She uses these in her classroom. She actually posts them on the wall just to encourage students. And also, this is a really good reminder to teachers of sentence stems and questions that you can ask during this portion when students are experimenting or trying something on the computer that has been taught or shared with them. So I know that it can be really easy as a teacher to want to just show and want to just tell, or just try this, just do this, let me show you. But instead saying, what do you think we should do? Or what else should we try? And encouraging students to make mistakes and that we learn from mistakes. Because honestly, that's how all of us have learned at least some portion of tech. So we really need to encourage that problem solving in the classroom. Because through productive struggle is how we learn. And here are some examples of how Pear Explorer in the classroom can support learners to build that confidence in digital literacy. As I mentioned earlier, Northstar is always developing new resources. And right now we're working on some new standards. So I had the opportunity to interview some students very recently. And I asked them, one of the questions that I asked them is, what do you do when you get stuck? And who do you ask for help stuck on the computer? And just 2 students said these things, but many students had similar comments. And again, these are Northstar students who participate in that Pear Explorer and in that opportunity for experimentation. So I'll just read them quickly. I turn it off and I come back again. Low internet, I check that. I try many ways. Before I was scared to use the computer and phone, and now I'm not scared after computer classes. Just keep trying different ways and you get better. I just try. If I want to know something, I just click, click, click. If it is wrong, that's okay. If I just ask others all the time, I might forget. But if I try myself, I will not forget. So I think that this just shows that digital resilience that's built through those opportunities to experiment in Pear Explorer. And all of the learners that I talked to were students in Northstar classes. So we had developed all of those awesome resources already, and we had the opportunity this last summer to work together to create some new stuff for you, some new resources through a Minnesota ABE grant funded project. We wanted to explore how we could further integrate opportunities for learners to apply digital literacy skills, the digital literacy skills that they gained through the units of curriculum, and integrate and articulate how the Northstar curriculum integrates soft skills like the TIF and support specific college and career readiness standards that students begin to work towards. So this project allowed me to collaborate with Kristine, who is here, and through the project we developed two things. The first of which are some alignment maps. And these are maps that outline where specific skills and standards appear throughout the Northstar units. Within the maps, there are direct links to lessons where learners begin to work towards some of these skills. And we hope that the maps are helpful planning guides for instruction and that show you where you could maybe target or zero in on some specific skills that students in your class might want to work on. And then we also developed some really cool, I think, CCRS aligned unit projects. And the projects give learners opportunities to apply those foundational digital literacy skills that they might use throughout a unit of Excel, for example, to a project, a CCRS aligned project. And we're going to be sharing specifics and showing you examples of both of these things and giving you examples of how you might incorporate them into your instruction. All right, let's just pause for a minute. And if you have any questions about anything that I've shared so far, if you want to chat out a question, I'd be happy to ask that. And I think that there was some clicking coming from my headset. Hopefully that has stopped. Sorry about that. I'll try not to move my head around so much.
I'm not seeing any questions.
All right. So first we're going to share about the CCRS alignment maps for Northstar. As I mentioned before, the standards all support each other and help learners to build skills. And so the Northstar standards really help to scaffold up to a lot of the CCR standards and give students the tools that they need to meet those standards. So I think Kristine is going to share a little bit about the next examples that we have.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. People often hear me talk about the ACES TIF and how important that is to the CCRS standards, because those soft skills, such as using graphic organizers, effective communication, note-taking, being able to self-manage and set goals, these are all really crucial to do the rigorous work of the standards. But technology is also built very, very strongly into the CCRS standards. And so the Northstar standards really serve to give our students a foundation to be able to do much of that work. And we have some specific examples here from the English language arts standards. So in this case, we're looking at standard 15, and there's also a new CCRS project around this about using Google Docs. So students are going to need to be able to share a document, be very intentional about understanding the difference between being a viewer, being a commenter, being an editor with those sharing settings. And one of the writing anchors in the CCRS that we're highlighting here is using technology to produce and publish writing and to interact and collaborate with others. So in order to interact and collaborate, students are going to need to be able to share their documents. They're going to need to be able to understand how to be interactive with those documents. So this is a Northstar skill that's really important in supporting a writing anchor. Next slide. Here's another one, PowerPoint. There's an entire unit about using PowerPoint, and under the Northstar standard, students are going to learn how to insert items, how to change the sizes, whether they're charts or videos, inserting video or clip art or free photographs, anything like that. And there's a speaking and listening CCR standard that talks about making strategic use of digital media. It grows. It's including and then integrating, and then finally at the level E, they're making strategic use. But in order to create a presentation and purposely choose visuals for that presentation, students of course need to know how to incorporate and insert those items. So again, you see the relationship here between the Northstar, a Northstar standard and a CCRS standard. Next slide. And finally, internet basics, which is another Northstar standard. And in this case, students are working on performing internet searches using parameters. So they're learning how to, instead of typing something in a search box and coming up with 1 billion possible sites or entries, they learn how to use search terms. They learn how to filter down what they're searching for. And we're going to talk even a little bit more about Writing Anchor 8 in a little bit. But students in Writing Anchor 8 need to gather information from multiple resources, not just print, but also digital resources. They have to assess the credibility of each source and integrate information. So again, in order to, of course, do that kind of searching for relevant information on a burning question or a research topic, students need to have some skills for dealing with results of a search and being able to filter down into things that are really useful.
Thank you, Kristine. So now it's your turn. I'm going to read the reading anchor at the top of the page. And I'd like you to think about which of the Northstar standards in the boxes below support learners to meet this standard. So use text features and search tools, for example, keywords, sidebars, hyperlinks, to locate information relevant to a given topic efficiently. So which of those Northstar standards, standard 6 from Computer Basics, 14 or 13, do you feel like best supports that? And please chat out your ideas. Give a little wait time for thinking and typing. 14, yes. Identify and make use of common website interactions and knowing what hyperlinks are. That's an essential foundational skill to meet that rating standard. Yes. And if you are thinking that there are others that also help to meet that anchor standard, you're right. All of these standards could be helpful to help to meet that anchor standard. Knowing, demonstrating the ability to scroll on a page helps you to search for those things. And identifying the difference in mouse pointer shapes also can help you to find hyperlinks within websites. So the point is that Northstar standards are definitely foundational and supportive to college and career readiness standards. And I'm going to hand it over to Kristine to talk more about the shifts.
Thanks. I'm going to talk a little bit about the shifts, the English language arts shifts, and then we are going to take a closer look at these detailed alignment maps that really help with curriculum planning. And then I'm going to show some examples of how some of these CCRS projects can be incorporated into a lot of different content and levels. When we talk about the CCRS English language arts shifts, there are 3 shifts, and those are complexity, evidence, and knowledge. And so complexity is regular practice with complex text. Text, it can be visual, it can be a print text, it can be digital. So there are a lot of different texts that students can work with, and a focus on academic language and learning that academic language and unpacking it. We also have evidence, and we ask students to give evidence from a text or texts that they're working with when they're, especially when they're writing and when they're speaking about a text. And finally, knowledge, this idea of building knowledge often around an essential question or a line of inquiry, and using more than one text and a variety of different activities to build knowledge up into some kind of way to demonstrate summative knowledge at the end of a unit or at the end of a lesson. So I was really looking for these 3 ELA shifts when I first started going through the Northstar curriculum, trying to determine what would be the best places to really strengthen alignment to those shifts in these new projects. Next slide. So these are some things that Leah and I had a lot of talks about when we were creating a template for these CCR projects. And complexity, what's been done in these additional projects now for each of the units, addition of texts. Leah has written a text, a longer text, for each of these units that students can work with now around the question or the content of that unit. There are now sets of text-dependent questions. So there are questions that go with the text that build in complexity, so that students are doing higher and higher level thinking as they're moving through the questions in these question sets. And now every unit or every project has specific academic vocabulary highlighted, and there's some activities with that academic vocabulary, but for the teacher, it also just pulls it out. It's one less step that the teacher has to do with the text, and the teacher can continue to design activities around that. For evidence, definitely increasing the support that students now have opportunities to talk about the text, and they have opportunities to write. And we built in academic support such as sentence frames, stems, to help support writers or students when they're speaking and writing. And students need to be able to demonstrate that they can locate evidence to support their answers. And finally, knowledge. Every one of these projects is built around an essential question, and the content in each of these unit projects builds the learner knowledge to a final application task where the student can demonstrate what was learned during the unit. Next slide. Turn it back to Leah.
Thank you. So we're going to look at the alignment maps, and I'm going to show you where you can find these first. So I'm going to click out and go to our Northstar website, and you will have to log in. We'll share information about that and how you could do that if you're not sure how to do it at the end of our presentation. You'll click on resources and Northstar curriculum, and then you'll see those 13 topics. And we're going to look at Google Docs and the College and Career Readiness Standards Alignment Map. So here at the top is just pretty much all the stuff that Kristine and I just shared with you. And here you can find, I'll just talk you through the map a little bit. There are the lines of inquiry. These help to guide that unit project that comes at the end of the unit after students have built those foundational skills. Yes, and all of our curriculum is free for Minnesota ABE programs. Here you can click back to those foundational lessons where students are building their digital literacy skills. But here's just an overview of all the skills that are practiced throughout the unit. As Kristine mentioned, we've pulled out those high frequency academic words for you so that you can do more with them should you want to. Maybe you have a word wall in your classroom. Just nice to have them pulled out. And then there's all the unit specific content vocabulary. Sometimes these cross over. This just means that these words were present in the original lesson plans as well. Here at the bottom, we have the anchor standards. And then also on the right, you will find CCRS aligned activities in the Northstar lessons where students begin to build skills to meet those anchor standards. Again, they're not completely meeting those anchor standards. They're just building some of those beginning skills to meet those anchor standards, as we showed you in the examples earlier. So one example that I'll point out at the bottom here is for the language anchor 2, which is where students are working towards demonstrating conventions of standard English like capitalization, punctuation, spelling. Learners work on that in the unit project by editing a piece of writing using a checklist and revising their drafts based on self and peer review. And then also they're working on it in lesson 9, where they review a document using a spelling and grammar check tool. So they're beginning to build some of the schools through, or some of those skills through digital literacy. Here they're collaborating in a Google Doc and also working towards editing. I'm going to click back into our session. And here's that example that I shared with you. And we hope that these alignment maps are helpful again for planning or starting to think about how you can build in digital literacy instruction and English language arts together. So we'll pause for a minute to see if there are any questions about the maps before we dive into the projects and share a little bit more about those. And if there are no questions, we'll keep going, but we will pause if we see questions in the chat too. So we shared about the maps and we're going to share about the other resource that we created for you, which is the unit projects and how you might incorporate those. But first I'll show you just what they are. So we developed a CCR aligned project or extension for each unit of Northstar curriculum. Again, it's an opportunity for students to apply those digital skills that they've built throughout a unit. They're not designed to show mastery of those standards, of those CCR standards, but they are opportunities to work towards those standards in meaningful ways. And each completed unit of Northstar curriculum has one. They're estimated to take about 3 to 6 hours. That's how long they took in the pilot. But we recommend breaking them up to fit class timeframes and learner level. And also breaking them up allows students even more opportunities to revisit the texts and the projects over multiple class periods, which is good and gives them multiple opportunities to engage with that content. And each unit project includes a leveled text, as Kristine mentioned, and I'll show you an example of that in just a little bit. And also opportunities for close reading and really doing some work with those texts. They support learners and teachers with that predictable lesson plan structure that you've maybe gotten to know through Northstar if you've used the lesson plans before. So there are learner-friendly I can statements, before reading activities, close reading activities, a scaffolded academic discussion opportunity, and then also students apply their learning by answering a line of inquiry question, and there's always a wrap up and an opportunity for students to self-assess and just be thoughtful about if they've met the standards at the end. They're adaptable, so they're grab and go, they're scripted, and very similar in voice to the other resources that we've created. So I will show you one and show you where you can find these. Again, you go to the website, resources, curriculum, and we're going to look at Excel. If we click in here, we'll see these are all the regular lesson plans, and the unit project comes at the end, because that's one way you might use them, is to teach all the lessons to build those digital literacy skills and then use this as an extension. That's just one way. So the line of inquiry you'll see at the top. And for this unit project is, what are some daily uses for Microsoft Excel, and how can spreadsheets help you organize and make decisions in areas of your daily life? It links back to those foundational Northstar standards. And we highlight the CCR standards that are key in the unit and a supporting standard. There's a teacher launch page where the vocabulary is pulled out here, and all the things you need to do to prep for the lesson. And all of these are links to the documents that you'll print. The lessons will start with a warm-up. And that's an opportunity for the instructor to discover what learners might already know, also, or to introduce a new concept or to review. So here they're looking at an example of a family budget that's created in Excel and discussing in small groups or pairs a little bit about that and how it might help that family to organize, how it could be a helpful resource. There are learner-friendly I can statements, and again, you probably would break up this huge unit project, so you wouldn't be working on all of these in one class period. But these are the college and career readiness standards broken down a little bit into learner-friendly language. So you can set goals. We know that's motivating for learners. We know it's very important to goal set together. There's a before reading activity, and in this activity is students have the opportunity to preview the text and the title and the text features. And I will show you the text for this particular unit. It is called Using Excel in Daily Life. And so all the texts that we've written are appropriately leveled for intermediate level students. So they're reaching towards this. You'll see that vocabulary is highlighted. Also, all of the lines are numbered within the text, and that makes referring back or citing evidence within the text easier. It's easier to talk about as a class. You'll also see within our text examples. So here's an example of a monthly budget in Excel. And there's lots of visual support within the text. So after that first reading, sorry for the scrolling here, I'm going to go down to the next part. This is actually the second time that they read, or this is when they read the text for the first time. So before they're just previewing it. Now they read for the main idea and gist. There is always a multiple choice question to help them get at that main idea. And then they'll discuss with the pair why they chose that and cite evidence in the text that help them to know that that was the main idea. And we did include possible timestamps here of how long this might take with intermediate level learners. Again, it could take more time or less time depending on the level of your class. In the close reading run, which is really the second time that they read the text, you introduce a purpose for reading. And the purpose is to answer some text dependent questions. And in those text dependent questions, learners are asked to make inferences, describe the organization of the text, and define the meaning of key terms. And I will show you what that looks like. So it's multiple choice, and it also asks them to cite the line of where they find their answers, or to revisit and read again specific lines within the text. After that, learners engage with the text again through another reading. And in this reading, learners will be annotating the text. So here they're looking at that text and they're thinking about what the author says a spreadsheet could help, a specific spreadsheet template that they're introducing could help them to do, and what they would need to include in that kind of spreadsheet. And so they note that, they annotate that on their read, and then they'll note it here. So there's some sentence frames. They describe the spreadsheet that the author is introducing, how many rows and columns it has, what the headers are, and what it could help you to do. And there's also, to support teachers, we have included answer keys here. so that you can help to guide students and you don't have to do all that brain work of digesting the text. The reason that students are doing this is to apply their learning to create their own Excel spreadsheet in order to organize some data or to make an informed decision. So they choose the purpose and then they choose one of those templates that are introduced, and they create it and share it with the class. There's also vocab work, another check for understanding. And then there's always a wrap up where students summarize the article's main idea and then self-assess their learning. Did they meet the main objective, or did they are they able to do what was presented in the line of inquiry? So every single unit project is set up the same. However, some unit projects have text, some of them have infographics, one of them has a PowerPoint that learners close read. So the text changes, and of course the activities that learners do change slightly, but the structure is always predictable and the same. So those are the unit projects. Kristine's going to give some more ideas on how you might adapt and use these for your classes.
Thanks. Leah's just done tremendous work to create these incredible resources for teachers. And especially if you're not feeling overly comfortable with a digital literacy skill, like it's been a long time since I've used Excel for anything than just, listing things where I actually used formulas. I would not be confident teaching Excel to students. However, that unit, the Northstar unit, and then the project, it's also beautifully laid out so that, I could feel really confident in teaching my students some of the basics of Excel. But I also like to pick and choose when I see curriculum, and I'm not always someone who goes beginning to end, especially if I get more comfortable with it. I like to pick and choose and blend together activities from a variety of resources, plus, my own. And so I thought about ways that these unit projects could be used, and they're very adaptable. You can go through the regular unit and the Northstar lessons, and then use the project as kind of a summative assessment or a demonstration of learning. You can also use the projects by themselves. You can incorporate the projects into other instruction, and I'm going to show a couple examples of that next. You can use the projects and the essential questions as a base, and you can build out. You can add additional vocabulary activities. You can add, you can add an additional text to go with the text that's there, and have students working with multiple texts. You can also use these as a guide for developing additional CCRS aligned instruction, because these have the 3 shifts are built in, and they're a nice model. I like using curriculum often for models to create my own. Next slide. So let's take a look. I pulled from 3 of the projects to talk about some different ways that you could use pieces of these. And this first one is from the social media unit, which is unit 11. And the line of inquiry from that unit is, how can a social media presence help or hurt a job search? And I know that many, or if not most of us, have had conversations with our students about it's much different today than it was when a lot of us were applying for jobs, where we have this whole online record that can haunt us. And so the idea of reading and reasoning with visual info, where students have to close read an infographic and summarize an argument. There's some really good skills here where I could see adding additional infographics and having students practice this kind of summarizing I could use this in a lot of ways, particularly if I'm using infographics, even an infographic that I'm using for GED prep, or an infographic that I'm using to teach another content area, but using this process. Next slide. So here is a picture. This isn't the entire infographic, but it is an infographic about what employers say can hurt and help potential employees on social media. And I've matched the anchors here, or some of the anchors. There's a reading anchor here to read closely, because students are required to read closely to determine what the text says. And then they're going to have to produce an information text to and include details from the infographic when they are doing a summary. So, and you can see here also, there are a lot of ACES TIF skills involved here as far as using, looking at the infographic, but as far as taking notes, and talking about the infographic together. There are the text dependent questions there to help students really dig into that infographic. Next slide. And then built into the unit is an application activity where students, again, they read the infographic closely and they're going to write about a summary about the infographic. So the supports are here to help students plan a paragraph and then use a template to write a summary of the infographics argument. I think this is really important, especially for our GED students, because a lot of times they don't realize that visuals like infographics or charts or graphs come from a point of view. And so this is complex work where students have to recognize that there is a point of view, there is an argument being expressed in many of the visuals that they see. And so I could see using this in a lot of different subjects. Next slide. There is Unit 4 is about Google Docs, and the project that has been created is about the writing process. And many of us end up teaching writing along with the other things that we're doing, or maybe we teach writing and that's the bulk of what we do. But introducing the writing process is always something that we need to do with students. And there's a rationale offered here, the steps of the writing process, and then some practice. I'm going to go to the next slide. And Leah's created a really accessible text at the kind of the low intermediate level about why I should use the writing process and some description of the steps and how the writing process works. And I just think about, I would use this in the academic literacy class that I teach as a great resource for teaching the writing process. But students learn and practice. They read, they annotate the text. There's a wonderful graphic organizer where students not only have to remember the steps, but they have to go one step further and recognize the benefit of each of the steps. And if you've ever taught the writing process, you might have students who say, why do I have to do all these steps? I'm going to write something, here it is, right? And recognizing there are reasons for a process. Again, text-dependent questions, then they brainstorm using a web, and then this one is creating it in Microsoft Word, but the next project actually has them using a Google Doc. But we'll go to the next slide here. And again, just some examples from that unit, a very concise application where students pre-write, draft, revise. And then the editing, one thing that I like about this is there's a very simple editing tool that's included in this where students edit they self-edit and then they peer edit for punctuation, capital letters, some simple grammar, and spelling. And a lot of times when we ask students to peer edit, we need to really show them concretely how to do that, or give them a tool that they can use so that they can go beyond, I like what you wrote, and do some directed editing. So I like that that's here and ready to go. Last example. Incorporating research skills. I've been thinking a lot about research, and we do in the standards, students are expected to do some kind of research at almost every level, and that's going to look different. But whether you have a student who has a burning question, or you want a student to develop a presentation, or they are doing research for informational writing or developing arguments, this goes all the way up into diploma and GED. Evaluating the information that you find in research is really a crucial skill for students. And that is included in Unit 2 in the project that goes along with Internet Basics. Next slide. So this is a great tool. I would pull this right away into my academic literacy course. I would use this with a diploma student. I would use this with intermediate level students. I would use this in a science class or a social studies class, wherever students need to do some research. And what students need to do is they need to find 4 online sources. You could certainly adapt this, that answer a question and decide, is the website reliable or less reliable? And of course, there's a wonderful text that goes along with this in the unit, but students need to identify some characteristics. And then they have to go one step further and determine, based on what they've seen, is the site reliable or less reliable? And I added a step to this. This isn't in the unit, but it's just an example of how you can just definitely expand. And that's the final slide here. Next slide. In addition to determining if the website is reliable or less reliable, because I added one sentence stem that students will have to say website blank is reliable or less reliable because blank, a specific example to support my conclusion. So I want them to be able to state something specific from the website, whether it's a specific example to support my conclusion is I can't see who wrote the website, or the date that it was updated is old, or the person doesn't seem to have any experience or expertise. So it could be any number of things, but that students would have to give an example. So those are just some examples of the great stuff that's here, that's free, and it can be pieced out, it can be incorporated. It doesn't have to be a Northstar class. It can be incorporated into content classes. Next slide. So again, especially with that last one with research, diploma or college prep, it's great support. Students are researching and evaluating websites that they're looking at and the content. Short research projects, when students have burning questions, simple burning questions, and they can determine if the information is reliable, and then they can use that information and develop it, develop a presentation, just talk to the class about what they found out about the burning question. And an information literacy unit, this is really important as we teach students how to determine, especially I like the idea of them applying this to their favorite websites or the news sites that they often use, so that they actually start thinking critically about kind of their go-to sites and how reliable or not so reliable those sites are. And then finally, there's Stanford has a civics online reasoning. It's all free, and it's getting students to dig into Twitter and Facebook and unreliable photographs online and all kinds of social media, and learning how to evaluate the reliability. This would be a great place to start, like getting students, into the topic and activating some knowledge. So lots of different examples for lots of different levels. All right.
Thank you, Kristine.
You're welcome.
So now let's hear from some teachers who are using Northstar in their classrooms. And first I will introduce Barb Murphy. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you, Leah. My name is Barb Murphy. I work with Minnesota Literacy Council, and I've been with them for 8 years and been in adult basic education since the turn of the century, I believe, 21 years. So personally, I had absolutely no confidence at all using computers, and let alone the thought of teaching computers. So this was really overwhelming. I didn't have any curriculum to work with, right? So there was that. You can go ahead. So then before the pandemic, that September of 2019 is when I first started using the Northstar curriculum. And I had about 6 to 10 students. Our funding was grant funded, and we needed to have some requirements met by the students, one of which was they needed to have over a 210 CASAS score, which probably could even be lifted higher. So Northstar was not only new to me, but new to our school site. We'd never offered a computer class, to my knowledge anyway. So from there, I found out I get to teach computers to English language learners using the computer. So this is what I look like. And believe me, I had a few choice words that went along with that bit of knowledge as we moved into distance learning. So yeah, it was a very unsettled time for me. So during the pandemic, I taught on Zoom. Yeah, Kristine, I'm sure. I had about 6 to 8 students. What I did is I collaborated with another Literacy Minnesota student, teacher who had just 3 students in person before the pandemic. So we collaborated and it was brilliant, really supportive for me because she's younger and very confident and comfortable using the computer. And I learned a lot from her. But so we recreated all of these Northstar wonderful curriculum documents that you saw, and just did a lot of copying and pasting and created PowerPoints and Google Slides in order to use them for instruction. And what we found is that not only did the students learn this stuff, but they really doubled down. They gained so many extra digital skills because they had to. You know, they were really forced to use those skills right in real time. So it was really great. They were also learned a lot about sharing the screen and showing, demonstrating for the other students when they had the confidence to be the teacher for that moment, for that example. Pandemic, back to in-person teaching. Normally I teach the lowest beginning level of learners, and I've been doing that for decades. So I really take a lot of time with these Northstar units. But it's really built confidence, not only with me, because I've taught several of these units now 2 or 3 times, but the students are really getting more confident as well. We're even considering turning my particular computer class into a HighFlex example, which would be, you know, allowing some students to join via video while I'm teaching real time in the classroom as well. So it'll give a lot more students more access to, you know, a certified teacher actually going through the curriculum with them at a, you know, a pretty reasonable pace. So, I mean, Northstar, I tell Leah all the time, just give me a poster board. I can be your sandwich poster child out on the sidewalk. I love, 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 love the Northstar curriculum. It is phenomenal. Huge gift for me to teach this. Like Leah mentioned, everything is scaffolded so intelligently, just very intentionally, and it makes sense. And it goes slow enough. It does that, you know, I'm going to do it first, students, and then we're going to do it together before I release you to trying it on your own. As Leah said too, pair ups 2 students to 1 computer, and a lot of peer teaching happens, you know, mistakes made, problem solved just within the students themselves. And that's a very successful way to do it. So initially I might do that and then ask them, do you feel comfortable? Do you want to try it 1 student, 1 computer, you know, today, or how do you want to do that now? So a lot of productive struggle, as both Kristine and Leah talked about. Lots of examples of interaction, hands-on activities, worksheets. I hope that you all didn't get too overwhelmed with all this information that Kristine and Leah were talking about. There is so much available, but just start with something. Just start with the basic computer skills lessons, and don't worry or get overwhelmed about all that's available, especially if you have more of an intermediate level class. I have yet to use those unit projects, and I watching now what Leah just described them, I'm like, oh, I could start using those now. I've never touched the unit projects yet in this last couple of years. So, when I get confident and comfortable with these lessons, then I'll expand it and go to that. But I don't feel like I have to do it all. And I hope you don't either. It gives you the answers. There were a lot of times I was like, the USB port, what's that? Or, whatever. And I mean, having the answers really helped to maintain my confidence. Like, okay, I think the answer is this. Let's check. Yes, the expert said that's right. So having the answer keys was incredibly comforting. And also, they each create their own email address if they don't already have one. Typically, we use Gmail so that then they have access to Google Drive. But they then get their own account created in the Northstar Online, that's the NSOL, where they can listen to the instruction through videos. They can take practice tests. They can just review everything that they've been learning. And because it's their own account, it keeps track. Like if they take a practice test, it shows them, these are the areas you were successful. Here are the areas where you're still struggling. And then I also have access as the instructor to what they have completed and how well they did or did not do on those tests. So that's a really handy thing too. And I can't tell you enough, Isaac and Leah and all the people that are on the help desk are really super helpful. No question is too stupid. Trust me, they've heard them all from me. And they're just really very quick to respond and very gracious in giving answers to the questions that I have had. So just two examples of some of these career readiness skills. I had students actually go ahead and you can click it one more time, Leah. Apply. She had worked for McDonald's for 15 years, and she wanted to get a higher paying job because she was kind of stuck. And she opened her computer, created a resume on her computer. She applied for a job online. She got a job working at a bakery, and she has $5 an hour increase in her income. She was so excited. And those are the kinds of examples that we just thrive on as educators, to say, oh, it's working. We're giving, we're not giving them a fish, we're teaching them to fish. And so they're really gaining so many wonderful skills from this Northstar program. And then the other thing that I do, this is I really break it down into some general vocabulary. And I take, I think Northstar was really created more for maybe native English speakers than, that's how it feels for me. I could be wrong in that. Leah said it was more for English language learners, but I still kind of parse out and break down the vocabulary that is suggested to even further words. Like when we were searching for a Google image, the students said, oh, image, is that like imagine? And then we talked about imagine and imagination, not only the different forms of grammar that they are, but also how the stress changes in the word, and how for English language learners, they may know a word, they may be able to spell the word, they could probably define the word. But if they simply say a word with the wrong stress, it breaks down that comprehensibility for the listener. And so I do a lot of work with the pronunciation for my learners, and I really slow it down and just take any vocab that I'm hearing them falter with or mispronounce, and I do some different types of activities. So it really takes me about, honestly, I teach this class 1 hour, 5 days a week, and I spend a month. I'm still on basic computer skills. We're in December. I'm on lesson 6 out of 8. So I maybe go too slowly, but I'm just used to kind of taking, and as someone said in the last webinar, I'm an instructional gymnast. I think that's what I was called. It was kind of like, I like that term. So kind of taking the same words, but then reintroducing them in a different type of activity. The next slide just shows you a couple of examples of how I might break down some of the words and just general English vocabulary that's not included in the Northstar lessons, but that might help them with some of their pronunciation issues. Like we talked about how we talked about the symbols on top of the number keys and the parentheses and the @ symbol, and how symbol, does that sound like St. Paul? Simple, is it symbol, right? So we just really broke it down into kind of phonetics and also syllable breakdown. So where you see the yellow highlighted areas, I put a large circle for the strong stress of the word. So we say like small, big, small for the word parenthesis. And we use our hands a lot, clap those words out, even at this intermediate or advanced level. And then the example on the right is then actually using vocabulary that we have covered in that lesson. And then having them then decide, okay, what category, if you were to break those words down into syllables, we've got a few different that are 2 syllables, but is it strong, big, small, as far as like the word keyboard, right? Or is it small, big, like device? So they have to kind of think through those words and then write them in the boxes underneath each of those syllable areas. That's about it. The other thing I do is I do one more thing. I'm sorry. I always print out a grid sheet where they have the word in a column, the pronunciation with either those syllable, big, small circles, and then the definition of the word. And so I include the words that are given to us by the Northstar curriculum, but then we also add on any of these other kind of random general English words that they want to remember too. So that's the end of my spiel. Also, if anybody that hasn't used Northstar and you want to reach out to me, I have many, many lessons that I have put into either a Google Slides doc or a PowerPoint. And I'm willing to just share that with you if you ever just want to get kind of a jump start and then get a feel and kind of create your own groove, after that. So feel free to reach out to me too.
Thank you so much, Barb. It's really exciting to see the way that you adapt the resources as an instructor to specifically meet the needs of your learners. So thank you so much. And if anyone does want to get in touch with Barb, I'm going to share my email at the end. And so you can definitely reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with Barb to get some of those resources. So our next teacher that we're going to hear from is Dani Brown. And Dani is very familiar with the Northstar resources too. And she's going to share how she has used them and adapted them. Welcome, Dani.
Hi, thank you, Leah. And Barb, that was a wonderful presentation. I learned so much and I can't wait to use some of the resources and ideas that you talked about with some of my learners. So as Leah said, my name is Dani and I work for Literacy Minnesota as well. Most of the time I am working with volunteers who are teaching either in person, remotely, or in a high flex model, working with computer skill learners who are a mixture of, I would say, beginning level English language learners and intermediate level. So there's quite a lot going on in terms of where the information starts, going from the lesson plans themselves to being maybe adapted by me, to being distributed to a volunteer who will then teach it to a learner or maybe learners of a variety of levels. So I will second Barb and say that Northstar is a gift. I don't know how I would do this process if I had to either find or create curriculum to start with. So also to underscore the idea that Northstar is something that you can jump into with a limited amount of experience around teaching digital literacy skills. My background is in English and history. I enjoy being a generalist and will probably always be a generalist. And I somehow made the leap from English and history to computer skills instruction. So I learned how to make this little guy in the process. So I'm here to say if I can do this, anybody can do it. Now I am the digital literacy coordinator for Literacy Minnesota. And pre-COVID, our model looked very different. We were using Northstar, and just before the pandemic, we were working with the Goodwill Easter Seals campus and also the Career Force Center in St. Paul to provide integrated education and technology practices, integrated education and training as well, for job seekers who were interested in getting employment. So we were all collectively new to Northstar. And once the pandemic hit, as Barb said, we were all new to remote instruction. So we had to adapt and we had to rethink how to use Northstar in order to continue to get learners the skills that they needed that were now even more vital in a more robustly remote workplace. Next slide. All right. So we started the process kind of however we could, which ended up being finding me reaching out and calling volunteers to see if they were at all interested in trying this thing called Zoom, and logging on to their computer in order to meet with another learner on their computer and talk about how to use computers. I think that volunteers are amazing. Quite a few people decided to try it and were very helpful. So the volunteers, one thing that I really appreciated about working with volunteers is that sometimes as someone who would adapt the materials or use the materials without adapting them, and who has worked in adult education for a while, I sometimes have blinders on about what is accessible for someone who might not have a teaching background or experience. So volunteers asked a lot of good questions and made a lot of suggestions as they were working one-on-one with their learners about what they could use, about what was a struggle, and about things that their learners were requesting. So I communicated with the Northstar team, and they were extremely supportive. They took all of our ideas. And together we came up with some trainings for volunteers, so to introduce them to Northstar, and also some tools. So we then with tools such as like Barb said, sort of copying and pasting the Northstar content into a PowerPoint mode, we were able to not only make it easier for one-on-one learners to join the classes, but also to add more learners, and I'll touch on that in a moment. We also together developed this one-on-one tutoring template. This this is a creation that Leah put together based on some of the questions and suggestions that students and volunteers and likely other staff were giving during the beginning of the pandemic. So with a tutoring template that allowed us to examine how we use text resources, how to interact with video resources, and how to use activity resources with learners. We were able to move forward and sort of meet the learner where they were at, and start connecting with them on their own personal digital literacy journey. And it just made things a little more explicit for volunteers who might not have had the background. If you want to go back for just a moment. All right, so thank you. We moved from small sort of one-on-one learning to small group classes. And we were able to then make the leap from small group remote classes to small group in-person distance learning and digital literacy labs, which have just started at our newly reopened open door learning centers. The volunteers are now comfortable doing remote proctoring because Northstar has developed a process that makes that really simple. And once learners pass with 85% or above, they can earn a certificate that allows them to show in a job interview that they have the necessary digital literacy skills for the position. All right, I'm ready. So I am going to overlap with Barb quite a bit here, I think. I promise we didn't collaborate on these. These are just the highlights. So the curriculum offers a very consistent format. As Lee said, the voice it doesn't change, and it makes it really easy to get used to it. It follows an IWU format, so it has that sort of gradual release of responsibility built in, and it's easy for new teachers to use. It's easy to adapt for new teachers. It is low prep. There's a lot of scripted dialogue down to the words of what exactly you should say, which is much appreciated when you're on the spot with learners. And then I really appreciate that the lessons, they do build on each other, but that they can be used solo, so that if a learner comes to the first 3 lessons, misses lesson 4, and comes back for lesson 5, they might have a question about a previous vocabulary word, but the content that is being taught is specific to that one lesson. They did a really good job of trying to compartmentalize while also carry the skills forward that people are building. It is also just very learner-centered. It aligns with the assessments. They're all the assessments and the curriculum and the Northstar online learning platform where learners can practice the skills by themselves. They're all based on the same standards. So everything is aligned, and it's really easy to navigate between a standard that you might not have understood on an assessment to where that standard is in the curriculum. Finally, this Northstar offers a very consensual learning experience. It allows the learner to agree to the objectives at the beginning of the lesson, and at the end of the lesson, it allows them to say, I learned this, this, and this. So people keep coming back because they know what they're going to learn, and they know when they've learned it. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I've color-coded some of the skills and shifts that we use in class. So volunteers tell me that they use the CCR standards With every lesson, they will use things like interpreting complex texts. If you go to any website, that is a complex text. And so if you're studying internet basics with learners, you're interpreting complex texts. Also referring to details and examples in a text, the content is very learner friendly. So the learners are asked to do things like interpret what they see before the teacher comes in and tells them what is going on. Also, they do a lot of determining the meaning of vocabulary in the lessons. In the way that I've adapted the curriculum for the small group classes, the learners first see the vocabulary at the beginning of the lesson, then it is bolded throughout the lesson, and they have to write down the gist of what that vocabulary word means in practice, how they see it in an example. And then at the end, everybody comes together and defines the vocabulary words together. So it is very good, and often and sometimes use the other colored shifts. So I am ready to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dani, for sharing about how you've adapted the curriculum to work for volunteers and how you adapted it to work during online remote instruction. It's just so great to hear from teachers. So we're
Awesome.
Yeah, we're not going to have time for the breakouts today, but we do want to wrap up. Here is where you can find all of the resources that were shared today. Again, all Minnesota AB consortia have access. If you're not sure if you have access, you can email us at support@digitalliteracyassessment.org, and we will help you figure that out. You can also ask admin at your site. They might know too, but we'll help you get in. Another thing that you might want to try is to reset your password. Sometimes that can be helpful too. Northstar on the website is where we post about upcoming training sessions that we have. We also right now have a recording posted about getting started with Northstar. It explains, really helps you to navigate the website because there are so many resources. And so watching that can be really, really helpful to get started. And then I will let Kristine talk a little bit about some other upcoming events.
Yeah, just very quickly, there will be another CCRS support webinar like this one, except it will be about math language routines. So if you are working with English language learners and doing some math, that will be the focus. The Language and Literacy Institute is coming up. That is our 2-day literacy extravaganza that Atlas puts on. It will be virtual. There are going to be several CCRS sessions. More information about that is on the Atlas website. CCRS webinar, our final one for the year, will be building inquiry in English language arts and math, and that will be in February. Again, Patsy, thank you so much. Appreciate you putting the link to the Atlas events calendar, and that's where everything is, registration, etc. Next. Join Mighty Networks. We do not have a CCRS specific group, but we do have ELA group, ESL, math and numeracy, adult career pathways, science, diploma, lots of groups. And you will be getting a PDF of these slides along with an evaluation in order to get CEUs for this. That will be coming to you in your mail, so in your email. So don't worry about marking this down yet. Or right now, you will be getting these slides. And last, check out this is becoming quite an interest. This is the Dirty Dancing slide. I found this, and that's what it, as a visual, and that's what this is known for. The Minnesota ABE YouTube channel is awesome, and even just the event from the beginning of November that we had, the day-long conference, all of those sessions are up, so don't miss any of the gems. But in particular, if you search CCRS or you look for the CCRS playlist, there's a lot there. And thank you for your attention today. And thank you to Leah for just a ton of great work that she's done to help us really bring Northstar and CCRS together.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Great. Thank you, Leah and Kristine and Dani and Barb. Super helpful to have you here. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. If there are any additional questions that you want to say offline, we'll stick around.